So emulation is cool because you start by doing some hardware hacking, and then you do some programming, but in the end, you get a game. And that's what is good, because not everybody understands programming, hacking, but everybody understands that it's a game. So that's the cool part of emulation. So this presentation is a bit for hackers and a bit for gamers too, because, well, they would be also interested. I'm going to talk specifically not about any kind of system, but arcade game systems, as opposed to consoles. Arcade games, for the youngest among you, is the games that you would have to put a coin into an arcade room or something to play. And basically that means that to be successful, a game would have to make you put a coin in that game and not the next one. And even worse, no share of the money you put in the machine goes to the arcade manufacturer, but only to the arcade room operator. So to be successful, arcade games had to be awesome. And to be awesome, well, typically they were running on dedicated hardware. So here you have an example. You have a Sony PlayStation controller, generic, many buttons and so on. And on the other side, you have a dedicated controller, 4 directions, no diagonals, and no buttons, because that was not required. But actually, the whole electric system and the cabinet were dedicated. So another example is that, for example, many arcade games had tiled graphics. So the graphics are cut in rectangles, and the CPU doesn't have access to it. It cannot draw a single pixel in memory. But there is a dedicated chip that takes a list of tiles to display for a frame. So the CPU just outputs a list of tiles, and a dedicated chip does that. So that's how they could get incredible graphics efficiency. But on the other hand, they wouldn't be able to draw a single pixel themselves. So a few arcade games are actually based on console counterpart, like powered console, but that's more the exception than the norms. So typically, arcade games are running on dedicated hardware, and everything in the game is the software and the hardware are typically done by the same manufacturer, by the same company. So a small history. So for example, that's the first perspective racing game, a Night Driver in '76. Well, not technically, and it's actually based on a German game in '75, which was made of 28 little motherboards. Talk about custom dedicated hardware, and the first racing game is German. Such a surprise. Can you hear?
Intruder alert, destroy it. Humanoid, intruder, prize detected in pocket.
So for example, they wanted always to have something impressive. So for Berserk, one of the first games with digitized speech, it costed $1,000 per word to be digitized. So that was really something extremely new at the end, and yet they also did a German version. Although dedicated hardware, Battlezone, the first FPS in 1980, which was actually designed to be a military trainer. First, flat-shaded 3D graphics running custom hardware again, iRobot by Atari. Dragon Slayer, a fully interactive animation movie running on a Laserdisc at the time where a typical hard disk was 10 megabytes. So Laserdisc was just made for video, and it wasn't really dedicated for this task, but they still made a movie for that. And they made a game out of that. Outrun, incredible speed effects, 2 motherboards, 2 main CPUs, 2 SPUs, and also a very nice deluxe cabinets. Hard driving, first 3D driving simulation, 3 PCBs. The sequence actually has 4 PCBs. So the 3D was not made by a single CPU handling everything, but by one small CPU doing this kind of matrix projection and this kind of operation. And altogether, it managed to make a 3D system way before there were CPUs that were handling everything. So arcade games were running on dedicated hardware, but sometimes it was not just electronics. Sometimes the cabinet itself was way beyond a racing game, so hang gliding, a bicycle, and so on. The cabinet could be also pretty impressive, or you are fully immersed in a semi-spherical screen, so that you cannot see the whole screen at a time. That's still used in Japan, Kitsuda. Or the R360, which would rotate the player on the all axis, even upside down. But, so arcade games were awesome. Awesome hardware, dedicated hardware, and even still because they were awesome, there was awesome piracy for them. And even though you had to duplicate or do really some hardware attack, there were some people ready to attack the hardware, fully analyze it, or even duplicate the hardware. And for that, because the manufacturer control everything in the process, they could also do awesome protections. So here is example, the Alpha 8201. It's a Hitachi 4-bit CPU with a polynomial PC. And it's running a virtual emulator in 1982. So they made a custom virtual emulator in 1982 to protect their game. And even sometimes, this time is electronic, but sometimes because they control the process, the protection was tightly integrated in the game mechanics. So for example, in Dodonpachi 2, this is the normal game, but there is actually a dedicated CPU protected that handles the enemy's bullets. So if you don't have the protection, you have the same game perfectly working, but the enemy is not firing at all. And I mean, it's not an if that is missing or is not executed. You just cannot, the bullet sprites never occur on screen because the CPU handling them just is totally absent. In Super Hang-On, the sub-CPU is sometimes encrypted and it's handling the road. So what happens if you cannot decrypt and emulate it? You got straight roads. That's quite boring. But the game is working. It's like, of course, you just have to defeat the initialization check. Okay, the game is working, but then quite boring. Typical in Konami, the sprite collision handling is done, among other things, by a custom chip. So here's the normal game, but if you don't have it emulated, you cannot die, you cannot kill. The game is perfectly working, sound and everything usually, quite boring. So, and really they were taking extreme measures to actually to protect their game, and a typical protection from the 80s, 90s was putting some critical data on a battery-powered RAM. So what happens when your RAM, when the battery runs out? The memory is cleared and your game dies. And like, yeah, you bought the game, pretty expensive, but it's dead. And that's the amount of paranoia they had in protections. And that's an important problem for emulation because here you see the battery. Oops, where's my cursor doing here? Sorry. Mush, mush. Okay, whatever. What's wrong with me? Sorry for that. Oh, yeah. So in this here, the battery leaked out, and the acid killed the board, even if the owner, owned the hardware itself. So that's a problem because it highlights the problem that you would have with those systems that will eventually die if you don't do anything, or even if you are careful. And that's a problem because when the hardware is not supported anymore, well, you have a very expensive paperweight, but you lost a game that sometimes is not playable at all anymore. Well, most of the time. So in theory, breaking such a protection, such a dedicated protection on a hardware would be illegal because you are not supposed to run even anything on this hardware, which are entirely custom. But on the other hand, you will enable the game to be played further. And in practice, if you're careful not to bother the commercial operations of the manufacturer, then you will eventually, even if you made it public like we did, you will end up having no problem for the manufacturer because you're actually enabling them to get their IP back. Because sometimes it was so protected that they would even lose the game themselves after the commercial exploitation has finished. So this is the Capcom System 1 CP system. This is known for Street Fighter 2 in 1991. So you have Street Fighter 2, Champion Edition, and the Hyper Fighting Edition, super name, so Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting Turbo, yeah. Also some nice shooters, Forgotten Worlds, Mercs, where soldiers can survive a falling mountain. 1941, UN Squadron, Area Hachi, where you fight B2s. You're a Japanese mercenary and you shoot down B2s. In the follow-up, the B2s are not bosses anymore, so you fight the giant tank robots instead. Goose and Ghost, Final Fight, Captain Commando. Oh yeah, you can punch T-Rex and kick pterodactyls. King of Dragons, where you fight dragons. Magic Swords, where you fight dragons. Kingpin, Punisher, where you can throw Kingpin around. And Strider, when the members of the Duma create a snake, a metallic snake, or whatever. Warriors of Fate, and also some non-action games, puzzle games. So CPS-1 was awesome. It was protected. it was hacked. It was more protected. It was even hacked. And even at the end, it had quite a strong protection. It already had suicidal batteries and custom encryption, etc. But still, it was hacked. So CPS1 was completely hacked. So for example, this is a Street Fighter hack. They even modified the game mechanics. So 8-5 ball to change characters and so on. Or Final Fight, that's the original one, 3 characters. And that's a hack where you can control the bosses. And actually, this was one of the first CPS1 games. So remember, they can hardly hack the graphics because that's on another run, but the game, they patch really well. And even the hardware itself was completely hacked. That's the original CPS1 board, so made of actually 3 PCBs, including a small one. And that's this Street Fighter bootleg that you saw earlier. Completely different hardware. So even in this case, because of awesome piracy, the manufacturer wouldn't get anything even from the sale itself. So Capcom did something, and that's the CPS2. So CPS2 started in '93 with this, Super Street Fighter 2. So it started with Super Street Fighter 2, and it ended with Hyper Street Fighter 2. You can't make that up, right? So Super Street Fighter 2, Turbo Edition, and Hyper Street Fighter 2. And of course, the Street Fighter Alpha series, 1, 2, 3, Pocket Fighter, the X-Men series, versus Street Fighter, Marvel, versus Capcom. I mean, I have a boring board voice, but those games were really awesome. Darkstalker series, 1, 2, and 3. Some action games. Alien vs. Predator. This one is really important because they lost the license soon after that. So basically, this game was not ported to any single other system. So that's one of the games that, as soon as all the batteries would have died, even Capcom had lost their IP because they couldn't port it, and they didn't do any. They didn't know anything to be able to emulate the game later, because then that could be a leak. And that's really that's really important later. No leaks. Dungeons and Dragons, and the shooters, 1986, 1944, Mahou, Jigo Wing, Marksman Tricks, and Pro Gear. That's only stage 2. There are 5 stages, and you can do a second turn when it will be harder. And to be honest, I'm playing without a cheat, and I don't know how I survived. And they were also really good puzzle games. Pang, Puzzle Loop, which is more known on PC as Duma, but that's the original one. That's where the game comes from. And Puzzle Fighter. And so CPS2 was really the successor of CPS1. So you can see in blue CPS1, and then in red CPS2. So see, they really changed, and it was even more successful, the CPS2, than CPS1. Really awesome games. And CPS3 was a kind of failure. So you see, it tried to survive with Street Fighter 3, but it didn't really. It was a failure. It was fragile, and so on. And so basically, CPS3 was the last hardware of Capcom, but CPS2 was the last hardware of Capcom in use. But something had happened in between. CPS1 was completely hacked. And here is a complete list of all the hacks of CPS2. There was no region patch, game swap, patch, bootleg, shellcode, hacks, protection bypass, protection emulation, bootleg. Nothing. Absolutely nothing for years. So they were so desperate that they would never be, no one was ever able to patch a single opcode on it, that instead of hacking the actual hardware on arcade, they used the Mega Drive version and turned it into an arcade version. And they even got it wrong with the spelling of insert coin if you see in the corner. Because it was an original console game, and they had to make it insert coin, but it doesn't spell it correctly. So that's the state of our emulation, hacking of CPS2. It was absolutely unscathed. So let's have a look why. The CPS2 is made of 2 boards, one system common and one, game specific, and where this is all what is important for us. And you have the sound and the graphics in green, all unencrypted, no problem. You could dump them, emulate them independently because they have their own CPU and chip. No problem. The problem for us was that it was very easy to make a fake because you would have perfect graphic extraction and perfect sound. So with a bit of tweaking, you would get a perfect fake. And data in the main ROMs is unencrypted, but code is encrypted. And that's the trick. Code is encrypted, and the keys are on SRAM, battery powered. And usually when you say code is encrypted but data isn't, people understand it wrong because of modern hardware. And they think, okay, you just need to patch something and to make it believe that the data is code and so on, so you will get code decrypted. No, here it's done at CPU level. There's a pin on the 68K chip, the FC2, that tells when it fetches up code if it will be for code, for execution, or for reading or writing. Which means at the CPU level, if you read memory, the data is transferred as is, and only at the moment of execution, it is actually decrypted. So basically, you had, the code is encrypted, the algorithm was unknown, data was in clear text, so you couldn't do a plain text attack. The actual CPU was not even known at the moment because there were plenty of rumors and you wouldn't know the actual CPU. And anyway, it's in the same block that you have decryption and CPU. And even the initial stack pointers and EIP are encrypted. So you have completely garbage code that is highly encrypted, and you cannot do anything. And if you try to patch something, well, you get a black screen and you're back at 0. So that was the state of CPS2 for many years. The patching was resumed to having a black screen, and you're fucked, and you reset the hardware and you try again. Hopefully, Capcom will do a mistake thanks to this. Neo Geo was the Neo Geo was a commercial success and was having similar games similar to the CPS1 and CPS2. So this was this console, and it was a success in arcade and at home as a console, really expensive, but Capcom was kind of jealous, and they had similar games. So basically, there was a similarity there. And, Neo Geo is known for the Fatal Fury series, Art of Fightings, Samurai Showdown, King of Fighters, and the Metal Slug, mostly. But of course, really successful hardware, a lot of great games. Neo Geo was also awesome. Hacked very quickly, completely emulated. That's the difference. But Capcom was jealous, and they tried the same thing. So they released the CPS Changer, which is a home version of the CPS1. They managed to make something bigger than the Neo Geo and more expensive. But the thing is, on Neo Geo, the games were released in arcade and 1 month later at home. Here, they just tried by releasing years-old CPS1 game, and the CPS1 and CPS2 hardware were already less powerful than the Neo Geo. So basically, it was a commercial failure because the games were known already and so on, where all the hardware was already too old. The only good thing I would say was the joystick was quite awesome. It was a Super Nintendo compatible. But really, CPS Changer was a failure. And what happened then is that as a last try, in 95, Capcom tried something last, maybe as a fad service, but it was even more expensive than the other games. And they ported one CPS2 games. Can you hear the sound? So this is the CPS2 version, which was emulated at the time. And this is the Street Fighter, this is the CPS Changer at the time. So roughly the same game, except that the sound is different. Okay, because the CPS1 sound is less powerful than the CPS2. So they had to backport, and it was a failure. But here, there was a huge, something very important for us, because CPS Changer is not encrypted, and CPS2 is encrypted. So that was the first leak of information. So you're like, I can imagine, you think, woohoo, huge leak of information. That's true, that was the first. But what happened? Nothing. 95, this was released in October 95. What happened after this release? Nothing. The dragon was still unbeaten. And to defeat a team of dragon, you need a team of heroes. So basically, CPS2 Shock, which is made of Razula and I, we did the first attack on CPS2. Then Charles McDonald did the second, deeper hardware attack. And then the crypto was defeated by Nicolas Almoria and Andres Naive. So what happened? The thing is related to the real title of this talk. That's Razula and I are not hardware masters. Razula is an Amiga programmer. He has extremely good 68K knowledge. And I was working on the PC side. So you could say back end, front end. He works on the arcade part, and I was doing the PC part for this. So basically, but before that, before I met him, Razula looked at the Street Fighter Zero Changer decrypted, well, not decrypted, ROM dump, and he started to make assumptions on what he could do just based on the actual code, without even having the CPS2 at home. So he started to look at it and make assumptions, and then he actually bought the arcade version of it. hopefully for us, it was a cheap game, so it was really easy to get the actual encrypted version, the Japanese version of Street Fighter Zero, Street Fighter Alpha. So Razula got the hardware, and I joined the project around this time, and he got the first result. He couldn't patch a single opcode. He couldn't know what the actual code is, but by looking at Street Fighter Zero, an unencrypted version, and assuming what he could do with the data, blindly, he eventually managed to have the first result of successful step of hacking on the CPS2, which was re-enable the crash screen. So now, suddenly, we were not blind anymore, and it was awesome, because now, even if we couldn't disassemble the screen, we couldn't disassemble anything, or we couldn't assume we couldn't patch anything, then by crafting the data, and we could see how it was interfering with the registers. That was awesome. But that's not where this screen, the facepalm, comes from. And the true facepalm was that once, so of course, it was not easy to progress because we were really blind. It was really very slow progression. But once the game crashed, and Razula had modified data in the palette area. Okay. And the game crashed, like always. But it turns out there was something unusual, and hopefully we digged enough in this direction, because, of course, it wasn't obvious at first, but it turned out that in some ranges of memory, the decryption was not happening. So that's why the facepalm comes from. You have a custom encryption that is strong, that is battery-powered, and so on. But for some range, they disable the encryption. Facepalm. Why? It's not used by a single game. So we have we don't even have an idea why it's in place. So basically, for the first time, we could actually patch and get our shellcode running. It wasn't so easy because at first we had no idea. We couldn't still disassemble the code. But after, and initially, it was a two-step stuff where we upload our code, we flick the interrupt of the CPU to reset so that the content is still in RAM, and then our second step of shellcode is executed. But still, that was the first patch of that it was possible to run our code on the CPS2 system. And after that, we eventually understood more the hardware initialization by guesses and so on. And then our execution was direct. But there were two problems. We only had a split second of execution, because there was something else that was protecting the hardware. It won't be too easy. And in theory, you could still not get anything decrypted, because when you read, it comes as is, and when you execute, it comes, it's decrypted, but you cannot see that. And we're not Dimitri. We cannot read register directly with a microneedle on the CPU. We were not hardware guys, really. So hopefully, Capcom is going to do a second mistake. There is an addressing mode in 68K, which is a program counter relative addressing. So basically, it's relative to the EIP. And it's not even clear in the official documentation. But based on the fact that you read relative to the EIP, they assume that you should tell the controller to read memory, but based on code. So you read as if it was code. And this only kind of addressing mode enables us to decrypt, to get decryption via reading. And that was awesome. It was a huge mistake by Capcom, because first, they never used that in the game, so they never found out that it was a problem. But also, Sega, which was using similar protections at the time, knew about that problem, and their encryption on the Sega system was handling that and was returning garbage results when you were using this addressing mode. So it was really a mistake of Capcom on that side. So suddenly, we have that was summer 2000. The whole project, did I say the dates? The whole project started in 99. And so that was summer 2000. Suddenly, we could decrypt, actually, word per word, content of CPS2 code. So that was like, we were highly enthusiastic, and we're like, wow, we're going to get some data by hand, and we're going to decrypt the algorithm. So I visited Razula for the first time. And we spent a lovely week, and Razula is on the CPS2, and he's oh, I missed a slide? No, sorry. He's on the hardware, and he's flicking the switch, because we only have a split second of execution. There is a word that appears on the screen. I write it down in Excel, we double check, and next, and next. And we dump, word by word, hundreds of stuff, and we were like, well, it sounds stupid, but if it was a stupid XOR or something a bit simple like it was in the latest version of CPS1, it would have been enough. And we dump, and we dump, and we're like, we get nowhere. But I remember once, actually, because there was maybe a micro pattern, so I guessed the next word. And and it's what happened, and Razula jumps on me, why, how did you find that? And it turns out it was pure a bit of luck and a bit of a micro pattern or something, and we got nowhere. So we were stuck. So that was, I flew, I visited 1 week. I didn't visit anything other country. I stayed 1 week in his room or something. I'm glad the last day before going to the airport, I actually had a decent breakfast. And well, a bit of a failure if you ask me. In the meantime, that was a span over years. So you need, we wouldn't have motivation to go on further. It's good to, to have a side quest to keep your brain fresh. Sometimes you just have to leave it a bit, and then you do something that's something related. And we had plenty of opportunities to do so. So for example, the Super Street Fighter 2 screen that you see, it's not the arcade version. It's on a specific Japanese computer, the X68000, and it was a really arcade perfect conversion. So we were thinking maybe there's a leak of information there. So took our time to disassemble that. Okay, nothing here. We actually also looked at the PC conversion, which was also very good, of X-Men Children of the Atom. Also, we patched, we spent some time patching the CPS1 emulator Calus. That was a funny project. I spent a month on it with IDA 3.8, and I re-injected new functionalities via code snippet creator by Xelion. And what's so good? So here you see that it was originally only abandoned the CPS1 emulator, and we patched it so that it runs the CPS Changer game. And even better, because the game were compatible, we included also, you can see here's a multi-CPS Q sound. We even added the CPS2 ROMs. So basically, we had the CPS Changer code running with the CPS2 sound on the CPS1 emulator via patching, via IDA, and so on. Also, we had some hardware, and the updates were, commercial. And they were protected by zip. And zip plaintext attack was quite new at the time. So I did a tutorial on it to avoid paying for the updates. And here you see the hardware we have. It was an EEPROM emulator, because originally we could only, you take the EEPROM, you reprogram it, you put it back, and so on. That was a bit annoying. And after that, we had an EEPROM emulator, so a fake EEPROM that is on the PCB, but you can modify its content on the fly from the PC. So in December 2000, 15 or 11, well, whatever. The thing is, Razula was mostly looking at CPS2 code, because that's the hardware he had at home. He didn't look really at the changer version. But it turned, luckily, he looked at the CPS, the unencrypted version. And you see this weird instruction in red. It doesn't do anything. It's present 40 times or so in the code. And we didn't pay attention to that. But it was a huge leak in information, because that's actually the instruction that if you keep it executed now and then, it will keep the watchdog alive. And that will prevent the hardware to reset, to stop working. So basically, before we only had a microsecond of execution, and suddenly we had full execution on the CPS2. And that was awesome, because in small here, you have another game that had an encrypted and unencrypted version, but much more rare. And in this time, they didn't leak the information. So it was really a huge leak. Thanks for giving us the keys of this fake compare instruction. And actually, if you, it's a birthday date or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was even actually easy to brute force the watchdog key on on other CPS2 hardware. So this time we had unlimited. Code execution. We could decrypt stuff. So it's time to make an automated dump, and we are now hardware masters. And we are like, how are we going to do transfer of information between the PC and the CPS2 at a high speed? And we are not good. So we decided to use what was already available to us. And this was the coin out ports of the CPS2 hardware. This is the output signal that when you put a coin, the system recognizes it and tells the cabinet, OK, I received the coin. So that's an out signal from the CPS2 hardware. And on the PC side, we tried, we were wondering some stuff, but we are not smart, so we decided to go via the joystick port. And there I was, Razula designing his part on the 68000. Oh yeah, initially we sent data directly via to the joystick port. It was garbage, unreliable. We needed a protocol. But chatting via IRC, him on his side, 68K side, and me on the PC, we separated. We took some time to grade the protocol. And actually, that was a bit tricky, because we had to make sure to, how do you say, that the protocol would work at first try because we couldn't debug, basically. And there I was, you see here, with my trusted joystick. I was debugging, and I was there. OK, bit, checksum, bit, because I could only use 3 bits at a time on the joystick port. But that was enough. That was enough. And then it was Christmas 2000, cold countries, plenty of time to hack and work and so on. And we did a progress. And 2001, we had the first dump, correct dump, and we had the first screen of CPS2 emulation ever. And it was 2001, and the hardware had been absolutely unscathed since its release in '93. That's quite a good survival time, right? Oh, so okay, originally there were no sprites. We just need some patching there. And this made the news. And now, suddenly, because the hardware was legendary, unbeatable, when we started, people were like, huh, look, no one could ever do that and whatever. And there were actually plenty of legends and rumors about the hardware that we had to defeat first. People were assuming this and that, and we had to make sure what was reality. But of course, now that we had a CPS2 emulation for the first time, well, people trusted us or hated us because they wanted everything immediately. But at least that made it easier in a way so that we could have more donations and so on. People trust us. Thank you. So game over for CPS2? Absolutely not, because here it says CPS2 encryption scheme broken. Absolutely not. We needed our hardware in working condition on a setup that we could not duplicate in the world. And Razula was, so we need the hardware shipped, and then we will get decrypted. But if the hardware is dead already, or very often, Japanese collectors will never let rare games or prototypes leave their countries or something. So it's clear that we would never get the physical hardware in our place. And it was costing a lot of money. But still, we enabled emulation, and it was cool, because suddenly it was possible. Suddenly we could play Alien versus Predator. And so that was already an awesome step. But at this time, only decryption with real hardware was possible. OK, so in the meantime, we were busy. So now a few years passed, and we received some hardware. And sometimes the watchdog is a bit harder. We improve our techniques. We actually had a contract, an offer of basically the manufacturer of the big joystick, the Hot Rod, wanted to have the exclusive. They immediately contacted us, and they wanted to have exclusive rights on CPS2 emulation, which would have been a possibility. But we didn't like that, and we knew that as soon as anything is released, people will go inside the software, the private software, and extract the key, and then emulation would be possible. So we said no. Well, maybe I would have been rich, I don't know. But at least I got a Hot Rod for free. That's such a size of joystick. It's good. And although the software that we used for the hardware, that the driver got, the hardware got unsupported, and we didn't, but so they were really nice. They gave us the source of the driver and everything, and we could turn this, how do you say, this EEPROM emulator into a fully custom hardware. Yeah, I forgot to mention, so how it worked. Basically, the CPS2 was sending data via 3 bits at a time. The joystick port was red, the checksum was OK. If the byte received was OK, then it was modifying the file that was monitored by the software of the EEPROM emulator, which was modifying the EEPROM emulators on the fly, and so on. Really clunky, but it worked. So years passed, and the latest Neo Geo game had a protection. So hopefully, we were ready. We had the hardware is similar. We had everything ready, and so on. So we also helped on hacking the latest protections of Neo Geo, but that was really easy in comparison with CPS2, and the algorithm was really quickly broken. So that was still cool. Hey, Garu emulated and so on. That was cool, but it was not really difficult. But still, that was nice. Another thing is, it was good to give back to the actual hardware authors. And if you remember, when the battery is dead, the hardware dies. The memory is cleared, the hardware dies. And it turns out that it not only dies, but you could say dies twice, because if you put back an encrypted code on it, it doesn't work. So they really made sure that you couldn't, a dead board was like really becoming useless. But it turns out that the hardware is not dead, it's blind and mute. There's no sound and no graphics. And eventually, Razula found out the stuff. So here, of course, we need an experience, and we need a board that was cleanly dead. Because there are plenty of dead boards, but you're never sure why they are dead. And we are not able to to see if the CPU is correct. We are not hardware master. So someone actually, sacrificed his chip board and gave it to us so that we could kill it. And also it was good because we could kill the rumors, because some people say, if you remove the battery, it will die instantly. You need only 15 seconds, whatever. And Razula could actually take the board, it's working, kill it, wait, like a true, I don't know, evil man. But at least he was able to have a cleanly dead board and then to make experience. And this is what is interesting with this video. You see that the slot for the battery is empty, and yet, magic, the game runs. So he found out. So here you see the game booting. Well, usually you would have a black screen, and that's the end of the story. So the trick is that some of the hard-coded registers have actually changed. So basically, you see that 400 or something actually was moved to FFFF in the code. So basically, to get sprites and sound correct, you needed to change these immediate operands. So to create a working immortal CPS2 games, you need to merge data and code that is unencrypted together, and then you need to patch the immediates corresponding to these specific values. Not all immediates have to be changed naturally. The thing is, you could say now, okay, you use IDA. IDA already existed. And you would do some binary instrumentation to have all the addresses of text, of code, etc. So you would, on MAME and so on, so you would do that easily. Thing is, Razula is quite old school, and he does that on dead listing. He wouldn't even use IDA. So congratulations, and then that's what he did. So first, he did a tester, a small program that would work on any CPS2 board, that would enable anyone in the world with a dead board to see if the game is dead, is half alive, I don't know, zombie, whatever, or if it's like completely dead. And then he was able to make patches of the games, that's called Phoenix Edition, that don't die anymore, don't need a battery anymore. So that was cool, because now it was also very cool for us, because we were enabled not the emulator guys or the hackers, but we were enabling the normal guys that had the hardware at home suddenly to have a board that would never die, at least for those with those batteries problems. So that was really cool, and that's actually things that happen. People have their working stuff, they cut the battery and they replace with Phoenix editions of the games. The thing is, this also enabled bootlegs, and the first bootlegs appeared. So here you see that the chips have been replaced by small components, and the CPS2 bootlegs. CPS2 was already late, and bootlegs were not exactly artistic. So instead of Mega Man 2, you have Giga Man 2. Yeah, not brilliant. But still, we were stuck because our dumping system was really slow. And to decrypt the algorithm, we needed a lot of data. That's 8 gigabytes of data. So basically, we needed someone to continue in our place, because with our system, I think it would take us 200 years to dump 8 gigabytes of all encrypted and encrypted with address pairs. And yeah, no, I'm not 200. So that's also a problem, because people, the public, the normal guys were saying, come on, release all the data, dump everything, and so on. And they just, but we can't. It's like, come on, you must be lying, or whatever. Okay, we couldn't. And hopefully someone is going to take over. And that's Charles McDonald. Charles McDonald is the one-man army of the emulation. He's really awesome. So he analyzes hardware. He documents it. He finds out the reality about the hardware. Then he finds some weakness. He designs his own attacking hardware. So that's an example. And then he's able to make it copies of the attacking hardware so that it could be spread over the world to people who have their PCBs. So instead of shipping the whole PCBs, the whole complete games around, he just ship his little stuff, and he provides all the software and hardware for that. And he also makes the emulator. So he's really awesome. Like the whole emulation scene owes him a lot. And the first attack of, if you remember, there were some small components, the PALs, and they are used for memory mapping. Okay, and PALs typically in a production system, you cannot read their configuration anymore. So typically they couldn't be attacked. But Charles had his own secret weapon, which is a PAL dumper. It's not a dumper, it's black boxing all the possibilities, and it's extracting the equations. So even though it's not possible to read, he was able to determine the content of the PALs again, and he replaced the PALs with, with programmable ones, just to check that he's right and the game is working, but now he has some control over the memory mapping. And he explores the hardware in a Charles McDonald way. And Razula also give him the hints that the knowledge that he had over the system. And then this time we have a real hardware master, and he designed his own CPS2 attack tools. Is it called? No. Yeah, it's called CPS2 tools. But anyway, and now he dumps via the extension port directly of the system over USB. That's much better. Of course, it wasn't so trivial, even though he has control of the memory mapping. It wasn't so trivial because there were still some limitations. But at least now he could dump the whole 8 gigabytes of crypted and encrypted pairs in 4 hours or 17 hours. I never know, but like within a short time. So he dumped the full tables of 3 games. I had a pile of CDs, okay, in my mailbox. So you look at seemingly random data, and you're stuck. And the algorithm was strong, and yeah, we could never find anything. So that's the one moment where Nicolas Salmoria, the author of MAME, took over. Of course, well, I mean, we were clueless about the crypto part. So Nicolas only found one relation that, okay, reduced that to 4 gigabytes. Okay, so before you had a table that was enabling the game to emulate it. Now you don't have a table anymore, but you have 4 gigabytes of data. And that's where Andreas Naive, Spanish, he's really awesome, and he's the best guy that I know in the world. You give him numbers, and he determines the algorithm. The algorithm was only possible because there were some weakness. It's only a 4-round Feistel network applied twice, and the function is not optimal. That's what I was told. I have no idea what it means. But he's really awesome. The thing is, at the time he was unknown, so usually when he started saying his stuff, it was like, what? But now he broke CPS2, he broke some Super Nintendo custom algorithm, he broke CPS3. If you have numbers and you want to, yeah, you need to get the algorithm. He actually had a nice blog post. I will send the link. I will show the links later. But he has a nice blog post where he explained his state of mind and his methodology. But yeah, I cannot explain to you. Sorry. So Andreas Naive reduced that to the algorithm, and suddenly it became 64 bits of keys. And so suddenly it enabled all the revision of the same game to be decrypted and so on. But there is a remaining problem, and that is REcon, because REcon in CPS1 was widespread, but on CPS2 it was a unique prototype that was only known in one copy, held by a Japanese. So basically, that game would never been able to. At that point, we could decrypt the game by having at least one time the key extraction. So one encrypted dump. But REcon had only one version and one copy in the world, so that was stuck. And that was the last attack against CPS2, which is David Haywood. He designed a new, I forgot to mention that the original attack was difficult on Super Puzzle Fighter Turbo because the code was so small, so it was really harder to make the attack. But I suggest, if you're interested in that, to look at Andreas' blog later. And so the last attack was with the idea of Dave Haywood. And suddenly we're able to, only with a crypted dump, to determine the keys and then have decryption and so on. So CPS2 was completely decrypted at this point. So the conclusion. That's how I felt sometimes when Razula and I were switching the flip and we were like dumping one word after one word. But I think, so that's the first part of the title, just keep trying. Sometimes you never know, you don't know if you're building in the right direction or in the wrong direction. Keep the faith, get crazy, and just don't give up. And also, not to give up, it's very good to have a side project that will keep your brain fresh, but sometimes you just have to leave the stuff. Actually, the only moment where I wanted to stop the project for good was once we had the first thing decrypted, but everybody said, come on, decrypt everything, you owe us everything or whatever. Yeah, who's going to get in jail if we decrypt the latest game? Okay, no one answers. But still, it's good to keep the faith and do, like this little lemming. You just keep trying, and maybe you'll get the result at the time. Of course, I don't claim I did that alone for sure. But also many people interfered, and Razula is an Amiga master, Charles is a hardware master, or maybe everything master, Andreas are crypto masters. So if you cannot defeat your enemy, call your friends and give him a good beating. That's exactly the thing. This would never have been possible if it wasn't a combination of skill sets and working more or less together. We didn't know each other. I only met Razula physically once. But I mean, yeah, for the greater good, for hacking, and now, well, it's emulated, so that's good. Yeah, maybe there's some violence here. But that's also how I feel regarding protection. It was a tough enemy, but we certainly killed him good. And that was really an awesome victory. That was really an awesome victory because the games were decrypted, emulated, recoverable. That was really awesome victory. However, it's not a perfect victory because for the hardware to survive, we still needed a patch, not the original code. We couldn't restore the hardware in a working state without a patch. And it's actually last year, only last year. So if you think about it, there was not a single leak of information, any unplanned single leak of information for many years. That's quite awesome now that you have leaks all the time. But it's only last year that surfaced the hardware that was, you can see here, battle circuit. So basically this little card is specifically for the keys for that game. So this is the hardware where you would put the actually the ROM and the card and reprogram it. So it's only surfaced last year. I don't know why. So maybe there's still a possibility to restore games in an original state and re-put the encryption keys on it and put back a battery. I'm not sure many people want that. It would be cool, but I believe that most people just get their batteries and put the patches that Razula created. Well, Razula and I helped, but anyway. Another thing important, that's the booting sequence of a fragile system from Konami. And this is exactly how I felt. This hardware is really fragile, extremely expensive to get in working state. And the thing here, it's like a countdown. It's actually the warming of seconds. It needs the ROM to reach a certain temperature so that it can work freely. They tried a new kind of memory, and it was extremely fragile. And it's how I feel regarding all these hardwares that are old, and basically without the donations and without the support from the public, we would never have been able to save those hardware. So that's important for emulation because some of those hardware are really fragile, and without the support of lots of people outside of the 5 usual suspects, it wouldn't be possible. So last month, there was a dump of a 32-year-old data east tape, and sometimes those hardware are fragile, and without donation and stuff, none of this would have been possible. This is the Konami bubble memory system. And the fragile, in black, you see the bubble memory itself, which is very fragile. And those hardware in working conditions are extremely expensive, extremely rare. Some links directly to the good parts related to the CPS2. The slides will be available. You have any questions? Oh, yeah, but the slides will be available. So, yeah. But this one is nicer. I don't know if you see, but it's a timeline of all the titles of CPS2, starting from the first one to the last one. I'm crazy. Yeah, it's... you have the algorithm, and you have notas the Andy. That's where he explains in Spanish his whole methodology. Andreas Naive, blogspot.com. And he also broke other algorithms, but luckily for me, for this presentation, that's the algorithm where he documented the most the methodology of his work. No questions? How much time? Yeah? Pushback, is that positive or negative? I don't know the word. So the question is, did the manufacturer try to come after us? So first, we were extremely careful not to release, because when we got the first game decrypted in 2001, if you remember the graph, there were still games being sold. So we were extremely careful not to get everything released, and that's what most of the public wanted. Decrypt everything now, and we are like, no one is going to jail. But actually, yeah, that's a part of the, I can jump to, because I have some bonus. So actually, we didn't get any problem from the manufacturer because we are careful to preserve their business, and we would help them to get actually games working again, like Alien vs. Predator. And this is here again, Alien vs. Predator. Remember, they lost the license. And you see one CPS2 game, Action Games, and one PC FPS. The thing is, they have the same title. And we got our IDSA takedown letter from that. That's why there are two addresses, the web archive and the new one. Because suddenly we were threatened by a lawyer who just found, oh, they make Elliott versus Predator emulated. But we had no problems from the manufacturer. Any other question? So we can go through the bonus. It's always good to smash a car. Yeah. Okay. There was something good that was, or you want I stop or well, okay. So Street Fighter Alpha 3 and 03 had a funny feature. You see the screen, and you see that the title color is slightly different. And it was the first game to have that feature. That after some time of working, like weeks of working, some features would enable themselves slowly, one after each other. And to show that to the consumer, the title screen would change the background. So basically, if you turn on power for the first time, you will have a white screen, and then you will end up having a red, a blue, blah, blah screen. And you have all those modes are only available after some time and so on. So this was a new feature, and basically if you have an electronic outage, then electric outage, suddenly your game is reset to the original state, and it means fans would come and say, oh, this is not the blue background, okay, we cannot use that feature, so let's go back. And this, it turns out that there was a hidden cheat code, which was the most complex cheat code that I ever known, because it's not in the game itself, it's in the test menu, the one that only operators have access to. In those test screens where you're just supposed to test the joystick, the output, and so on, Razula found out that there were really complex cheat codes to be implemented to re-enable manually this. It's like Control did, but much harder, to re-enable this mode individually. And when it's underlined, it's player 2. So if you look at the one in the corner, it's down, medium kick, left, down, medium kick, H punch here, sorry, down, and so on. Really complex, but someone who just had a power outage by entering this extremely complex cheat code would be enabled to enable it back in a software way. So I explained that already. This is another, the hardware that Charles had defeated. This is a Sega System 24 and 18 hardware. And here it's funny, so here the battery is in the same bundle with the CPU. You see the little wire, that is pretty nice. So if you open it the wrong way, the wire goes out, the current goes out, and your memory is dead, and you won. So Charles again did his specific device, and he got the Sega System 24 and 18 to be dumped again in Charles McDonald way. The interesting thing is, though those two systems had custom encryption, battery, etc., so they were similar, and both of them had strength and weakness. So the Sega system had a, the Sega system had a, was interesting because they didn't enable the encryption on PC relative addressing. So they knew about the vulnerability and they killed it. The thing is, the interesting thing is that they were, whatever the state of execution, the decryption on CPS2 was always the same. One address, one encrypted word, you would get always the same thing. While the decryption on the Sega systems was easier, but it was state-based. So basically, some state was reached, and then the decryption would change. Also, the weakness here was that, the decryption was different for some weaker considered opcodes than some complex ones. So the difficulties of that system was to actually make a first stage of shellcode based only on these weak opcodes that you could brute force more or less manually. So that was a trick. Another thing is that the keys on Sega system and Capcom were not the same type. I never know, SRAM, DRAM. So basically on the Capcom system, when the battery was dead, you would have a blank memory. But on the Sega system, when you powered up, even after the battery was dead, the memory would have random ones, which was still enabling more brute forcing even after the hardware was dead. That was cool. Oh yeah, let's probably skip that stuff. Yeah, then later, Razula worked on giving back, and as a commercial product, more to the Neo Geo owners by making custom BIOS with a lot of options. That was cool, and that's still updated today, I think. Yeah, that's Dragon Ball in arcade. Well, okay, you recognize the graphics, but wait, no one has ever heard of that game. No, because it's actually Ninja Gaiden. You will recognize it's the same game, but completely patched graphics. That's another possibility of game hacks. Make a new game from a known one. That's quite cool. I mean, it's not that bad. It doesn't look that bad. It's because Ninja Gaiden was a Shadow Warrior was a correct game. Then you have a correct game, except the enemies look a bit stupid. But anyway, that's another example. USAF Mustang. It's a cool shooter. So you have the sprites, cool scrolling. It was good. And here, there is a simple how do you say, electronic patching on some memory addresses. So basically, it's again an electronic protection. And they're quite nice because if you don't have this protection emulated, you get the sprites, you get the game running, but you have no sprites. So it looks like you're almost there. So this is the game running. But as soon as you as you shoot, you get a game over screen. So it looks like, oh, you get the game. You try to emulate or to copy the hardware. Okay, but you don't have the encrypted memory addressing part. So that's cool. And then you're like, wow, we just have the sprites missing. Yeah, almost there. You press shot, which is useful in a shooter, and you get a game over. And that's another game. That's actually the same game. But once again, in fact, this is a hack of it. What else we have? Yeah, in 2005, they actually, Bubble was not correctly emulated at all because the PS4, that's a nice name, the PS4 chip was still unbroken. And there were bootlegs that were produced by blackboxing the chip, but they were really smart. And as a good example of integration in the game mechanics, even the PRNG and many things were done by this protection chip. So basically, the guys, the bootleggers, were able to make a semi-good-looking bootlegs, like you saw at the introduction. But actually, until that chip was decapped and dumped, all the bits that you see in the background were read manually. Then this game was not perfectly emulated until 2006. Dimitri there? Okay, so this is another example, and it's still absolutely undefeated. This is the Dallas Semiconductor 5002 chip, and it's still undefeated, and some arcade games are still undefeated. So it's usually used in banking applications, as far as I know, and for us, but not for Dimitri apparently. It's considered unbeatable because it's unbeaten. And I highlighted one of the pins, as the I means self-destruct input. So basically, this chip, you upload some code, it will generate some keys on the first time, then the inside this inside code is encrypted, and it will even make fake reads and so on to full probing and this kind of thing. And if something goes wrong, it kills its own key, it erases its own code. So basically, supposedly you only have one attempt of hacking if you did something wrong. And that was actually what was supposed to happen with CPS2 because of all the rumors. That was hopefully not the case. But from an emulation perspective, this Dallas conductor is still, this Dallas chip is still absolutely undefeated. Raiden 2, maybe some of you remember. That's not actually Raiden 2, but you remember that maybe that cool purple laser, homing laser that was really cool at the time. And it turns out that this laser is coincidentally heavily involved in the protection of Raiden 2. So that's actually Raiden 2.5, Raiden Fighters, where you have the same chip and so on. But Raiden 2 is still not emulated, particularly because of the protection evolving in that purple laser. So maybe if you keep another weapon, that would be fine. But if you switch weapon, the game will crash or something, or it will not behave correctly. And yeah, just a funny slide for Capcom. I don't know what they smoke, but Street Fighter 2 Dash Turbo Hyper Fighting and Street Fighter 2 Alpha. Yeah, I don't know what they smoke. And another thing, for if you want some software hacking, some emulators have the abilities to display the hitting boxes on the game. So that's quite funny with Hyper Street Fighter, where you can mix the parts. And sometimes you see that, I will show. You see that here, for example, there is a error of a box that is here by accident. So here you have the turbo version of T-Hawk, and he has this box. So if you hit right here, when he's hitting, you hit him. And on the other hand, here, Dalsim, he's hitting in the back of him. So if you manage to jump at this one, he's like this, you hit him in the back. He hits you in the back. So that's quite funny. And that's the end. I hope you liked it.